Thank you for the opportunity to share with you today in the Ruth Slenczynska Centennial celebration at Southern Illinois University. I have titled my presentation, Ruth Slenczynska, Thriving as a Performer, Recording Artist, and Teacher During the Pandemic. Before discussing Ruth's time at our home, I thought I should briefly share with you the events leading up to that point. I first coached with Ruth in 2009 and then began regular lessons in March 2011. Twice a month, I would travel up to New York City, have a morning lesson, lunch with her, and then an afternoon lesson. This continued for many years. After lessons, we would often go to the ballet, art museum, and concerts together in New York City. After the concert, I would stay overnight in her home and would help her with emails and other secretarial work. This close friendship continued through the years. We even traveled to Spain together in 2013 after I was studying a piece by Debussy, and we became interested to see what he saw on the postcard of the Alhambra and how it inspired him to write the prelude. Many of you in the audience will remember the party we had for Ruth in New York City for her 90th birthday party. Ruth was always a part of our family. In 2016, she visited Punta Cana with us. My daughters thought of her as an adopted grandmother. Even though Ruth had demonstrated at many lessons, I had never observed her perform in a recital, which was different than many of you. In 2018, I could not resist the opportunity to hear her perform in Suntory Hall in Japan. I took off 3 days from my teaching and traveled to Japan for the sole purpose of hearing her perform. Her program consisted of Shostakovich, Bach, Brahms, Beethoven, Rachmaninoff, and Chopin. That night after the performance, I wrote about the experience, and I'd like to read to you what I wrote. April 21, 2018. Tonight's recital by Ruth Slenczynska, my teacher and mentor, was amazing. I cried as she energetically entered a full house, Suntory Hall, 2,000 seats, to meet her adoring public. The tears continued to flow as I listened to each piece express the inexpressible from a mature artist who knows exactly how to shape a phrase in a way that sends goosebumps up and down your spine. At the same time, this mature artist had the energy, drive, and stamina of a 30-year-old. The technique and accuracy was also rock solid, which was created through years of disciplined practice. I was privileged to have had the opportunity to observe her practice session in the hall today and saw firsthand her discipline at work. I heard metronome working, shifting accents, and hands alone practice. Did I also mention that this 93-year-old artist, who was in the hospital earlier this year, spent her morning and afternoon practicing on performance night? The rest of us would have been tired after the afternoon session and called it a day. Yet this woman came out and blew her audience away. I've been to many great recitals in the past, but none has spoke to me at such a deep level as this one. The spirits of Bach, Shostakovich, Brahms, Beethoven, Rachmaninoff, and Chopin were definitely with us tonight in this historic recital by Madame Ruth Slenczynska. So grateful that I could be in the audience. The audience adored her, and she stayed after the concert for several hours to sign autographs. Her work did not end there because she spent many hours the next day in interviews and performed many more benefit recitals during her month in Japan. I remember her shock to see me the day I arrived in Japan. I was definitely the audience member who had traveled the furthest, and I consider myself lucky to be there. Ruth's relationship with Lebanon Valley College began when she received an honorary doctorate many years ago. In 2013, I performed my faculty piano recital in her honor, and she was in attendance. In October 2019, she returned to do a series of workshops. As was our tradition, we shared Rachmaninoff's Italian polka as a treat for the audience. In February, Ruth began her trek to Japan for her next tour. As was customary, she stopped in California to rest at the home of Minnie Ho. As we all know, the pandemic began before she could travel further. In August, Ruth moved to Pennsylvania to begin her time with us. Pennsylvania was the perfect place because we are blessed to have so many wonderful trails that we could take nice long walks in the nature. And there were also many beautiful sights at the college that Ruth enjoyed. So each day we would take walks. Even on the cold days, we were able to go to a local Lowe's store, which was almost empty, and take treks around the outside perimeter of the store. So we kept busy. Since my college was remote, I was teaching from home, and Ruth was eager to be helpful. She often enjoyed listening to my students in their regular lessons. Ruth was intrigued by remote teaching, but was frustrated by the challenges of the internet, as many of us were during those early years of the pandemic. I remember one time that I was listening to a student from Brazil, and Ruth said, "Why is she playing this piece, this Chopin Nocturne, in a staccato form?" I had to explain to her that it wasn't the student playing staccato, but it was the internet coming in and out. Ruth was discouraged that her tour in Japan no longer looked possible, and she felt that perhaps she would never perform again. I said, "Let's play some duets for fun." We recorded many duets during this period. She was eager to find duets that she had not heard so much in the past, that were new to her, or had some special meaning. Many of these duets that we recorded, I have put on YouTube and shared the links with you. Other times we would record a piece just for the purpose of playing it for church and sharing it with the online church services that we had. I'll share a few excerpts with you. I'd like to share 3 excerpts from Samuel Barber's Souvenirs. In the first excerpt, you will hear the beautiful melody. Note the long line that Ruth creates. As you listen to the second excerpt, you may be interested to note that by this point, Ruth was beginning to have difficulty seeing notation with her glasses. As she learned the music, she stood up to get a better angle, and then sat down to play the phrase. I was so impressed by her drive to learn this work. As you listen to the concluding tango, you may find it fascinating to note that Ruth never listened to recordings prior to learning the work. It was only after she had her interpretation in mind that she would listen to others. When listening to other performances of the tango, she immediately said, "It's too fast." They have missed the idea that Sam wrote Tango Hesitation. She liked her interpretation much better. During these months of being together in the home during the pandemic, I also took the opportunity to interview her on topics that had not been explored in other interviews that I had heard or had not been explored in depth. We discussed her presidents in one interview, her experiences in Brazil, experiences in France as a child, including information about her teachers as well as composers that she knew at that point, about stage fright and how she dealt with that, and then more recently about her teaching philosophy. This is an interview that I had began in 2022 and had not published it until last week when I discovered it looking through some past information. That include various elements of her teaching style, about her book, her understanding of working with students, which I found fascinating. In each of these interviews, I have given you the link. Ruth was amazed when Decca reached out to her in late 2020 to let her know they were planning to reissue her earlier recordings. When her box set arrived at our house, she loved listening to her earlier works, and she was surprised by all of the information that was included in the booklet, as well as the fact that this recording was becoming so popular. You can see the rave reviews that this recording gave. Decca was also impressed by the popularity of the reissue and approached Ruth 1 month later to ask her to record a new CD. Their idea was to include a CD that would reflect her journey as encounters as a child with so many great musicians. So they wanted a short piece by Rachmaninoff, some Beethoven as a tribute to Schnabel, some Chopin or other French music by way of tribute to Courtauld, something to connect her with Hoffman, something by Barber, of course, and any other connections that she might want to play. In the meantime, in February, we were invited to perform a recital on the newly refurbished 9-foot Steinway at Market Square Presbyterian Church in Harrisburg. By this point, Ruth was beginning to work on solo material as well as the duets, and we began working on a recital, which would include solo material as well as duets. The recital was a grand success, and Ruth was very pleased. Her solo work was Beethoven's Opus 2, No. 3. As you know, this is an extremely difficult work with numerous technical challenges, and Ruth loved the challenge. When Derry Presbyterian Church approached Ruth to perform a solo recital in May, she eagerly took the engagement as a way to try out some of her pieces for her CD. The day after the concert, we took the train up to New York City to choose the piano for the recording at the Steinway Gallery. We also visited Ruth's apartment. She loved being back in the apartment, but also understood that it was not a good place for her at this point in time. She loved trying out the pianos and found the perfect one for her recording. In June, we spent a week in New York City making the recording. One of the highlights for Ruth was working with David Frost. His father had produced her earlier CDs. I was very impressed with David. He really did know how to bring out the best in her, and he knew that she loved a challenge. He would come out and he would say, "Can we get one more take?" She'd say, "Sure," and this would continue for much of the day. Each morning, she began with warm-ups, and then after the warm-ups would have several takes of a work. I think it would be interesting for you to hear some of her warm-ups. Unlike artists who perform the piece the exact same way each time, Ruth would vary her interpretations for each take, which would make it a little bit of a challenge for the producer to simply pull out a measure from one to put into another. This resulted in the need to create entire performances for each take. Ruth meticulously did these until we had the one that she liked. The recording lasted 5 days with a 2 to 3 hour morning session, a break, and then another session in the afternoon. By the end of each day, Ruth just crashed in her apartment. By the end of the last day, she was ready for a celebration. David Frost, the producer, meticulously reviewed each take and chose the best of the best. When she received his edits after a few months, she was thrilled. She wrote him a note. "It is a good recording, and it says all the things that music speak of. Also, the sound is very good. It's easy to listen to, and yet it has a lot of variety. I think that the producer has a lot to do with it, and I thank you, David. I'm particularly happy that several of the recordings reminded me of actual anecdotes. The Greek, for instance, reminded me of a time with crisp air on my trip to Norway. A happy feeling. I remember that in the fantasy, I had a hard time reaching the B major chorale because of all the harmonic changes. It is so peaceful when you get there. You take a deep breath. You conduct an angel choir, and everything is so peaceful. But then you have to get out of there quickly because you have to get back to F minor through a harmonic labyrinth. I remember the time when I played the F major prelude for Horowitz's memorial service at his wife's request. At the end of when I played it, Wanda put her hand on my left shoulder when I played the highest note before coming down. We were both crying at that time. David, I want to thank you for taking the time and trouble to keep my sound beautiful throughout. I also want to thank you for your good humor during the recording. Your dad maybe laughed more, but you were nice to work with also." The album was released on March 18th, 2022, and on March 19th, Ruth received a note from Dominic that the album was #1 in the Amazon chart on the first day. Those high ratings continued on the Amazon chart. Immediately after the reissue of Ruth's Decca recordings, journalists from around the world began to request interviews with Ruth. There were days where she had 2 Zoom interviews a day. After the Life in Music album, this continued even more. It was time for a true vacation. In July, we traveled to France for Ruth to see her beloved Paris. She remembered every street name and the best way to get there. She remembered the locations of her favorite bakeries and cafes. One of the highlights for the trip was to visit the apartment where Rachmaninoff taught. Ruth recalled the lessons with excitement. We also visited the concert halls where she played as a child. We also visited the location of Ruth's childhood home in Paris, where she regaled us with stories. Listen to her talk with excitement about her childhood home. Okay, so where are you at right now, Ruth?
Well, I'm at the entrance of 4 Rue Paradis.
And
this is where I lived in the time I was, well, not quite 7 until the Cold War started, 1939, when I was 14.
Number 4.
Did you see the number 4?
I did.
Yes.
And did it rain like this back then?
Well, Paris is Paris, and it has its rainy season. As you can see, the people are used to it. Many people in the street, but it's welcome.
What used to be across the street from you?
Yes. Up on the first floor, but we used to be. As I think it. And this shop is a grocery store. The name is Moorman-Stahlman, and we used to shop there.
Where did you used to stop to get the croissants?
Well, that's on the other street, but I think it's open.
Oh, okay. Of course, our time in France included nice walks in the park and wonderful dinners. We also visited dear friends who live in Paris and tourist sites, including Palace of Versailles. After visiting Paris, we visited Lyon, Aix-en-Provence, and Carcassonne. Ruth loved seeing the bridge at Avignon and singing the song about it that she learned as a child. She also enjoyed smelling the lavender in the fields. She always seemed to find the most beautiful gardens in any city that we visited, and the beautiful fountains. In every city we visited, she found the best art museums and regaled us with stories of the artist. After returning from our trip in France, Ruth once again entertained journalists with numerous stories of her childhood in her Zoom interviews. She also performed Chopin's Prelude in F major at the Polish Embassy for a special event. We once again spent the night in her New York City apartment. That was her last time there. In 2022, I asked her later if she would like to visit, and she said, "No, I know that I can't stay there, so there's no reason to visit the apartment again." The true love of Ruth's late life was born in December 2021. Ruth loved watching Cass grow up. When asked what she wanted him to call her, she said Gigi, the French name for grandmother. In January, Ruth asked, "Where should I play to celebrate my 97th birthday?" It was logical to do that at Lebanon Valley College. During the pandemic, we often went there for Ruth to play on the great piano and to have opportunities to try out new pieces. So, unlike most performers who would just use the material they did on their recent recording, Ruth chose to do all new repertoire. When the news got out that she was going to perform a recital, CBS Sunday Morning, Voices of America, New York Times, and the Decca engineers all planned to arrive, and they all came to her recital. Camera crews were everywhere for this historic recital, and Ruth was not flustered at all. Notice that she chose to wear a modest outfit to use for the performance. She was simply playing to friends in her mind. The hall was packed, and everyone wanted an autograph after the event. For Ruth, the real fun began after the event, when she had Randy's homemade cake with a few friends and past students who had attended. After her recital, she continued to give an occasional lesson in our home, but for the most part retired from teaching. She was always ready to share stories and would regale audiences in small venues, in addition to the large concerts. One of the highlights for our family was when the CBS Sunday Morning News crew arrived at our house on March 3rd, 2022, to conduct interviews with Ruth. When Ruth walked downstairs and saw all their equipment, she said, "Are they planning to stay?" She was immediately charmed by Mo Rocca and talked with him all day. In my opinion, their final product that they aired on CBS Sunday Morning was outstanding. It was the highlight of all the interviews that she had done during her time at my house. After that point, Ruth was hesitant to accept additional interviews. If you haven't listened to the CBS Sunday Morning special, please check it out. She loved the fact that it was filmed in our house and had such wonderful people to interview her. The recording day was immediately followed by a visit to see the growing baby. Ruth was all smiles as she sang French songs as we took him for a walk. In May, Ruth was selected to receive an honorary doctorate from Curtis Institute. She was thrilled to relive her childhood days during the day that she was at Curtis. She was very happy and proud that day. After Ruth announced her desire to formally retire from it all, we took her on numerous mini vacations. We spent a week in Punta Cana in the sun in March. She continued to love taking walks and spending time in nature. One of her favorite locations was the Peace Garden at Lebanon Valley College. She also loved to watch the ducks at Lidditz Park. She would sit and watch them for as long as I had time to stay. Numerous times we visited the Hershey Gardens, but on one special occasion, we spent the day in Longwood Gardens in the Philadelphia area. Ruth always insisted that she walk, but on that day she was so eager to see all of the gardens that she said perhaps the wheelchair could be useful on this day. She loved sunny days. Ruth also loved visiting a local lake where we would often take short hikes during the pandemic. At one point, she decided that she would like to go for a boat ride. I'm sure that she was the oldest person that had ever tried out the paddle boats. She also loved helping to choose the flowers for the flower garden in front of our house. She even enjoyed the weekend trip to Ocean City, Maryland in 2023. Many of you sent her flowers along the way, and she loved receiving them. In 2024, it was harder for her to get around, but she still enjoyed outings on days when she felt well. She loved the walks, even though now they were much shorter, and she enjoyed family meals. She also loved celebrating holidays that she never had a chance to enjoy in her younger years. She would sit and look at the jack-o'-lantern each evening and even had a name for him. She helped to put decorations on the tree each year. But the greatest joy was being able to watch the boys. Cass quickly grew and no longer sat quietly in her lap, but he still took her hand and walked with her and kept her entertained with all his antics. Look at all those smiles. She thought Cass was so funny. She loved sitting out by the swimming pool in the summer and watching us swim. She never wanted to get in the water, but she liked watching us. Our family loved having her in all the gatherings. Since she was denied ice cream by her father when she was little, she loved having ice cream at the local dairy and visiting Hershey, Pennsylvania to have a crepe at a French creperie. When Addie was born, she had the chance to hold the little baby again. She was always very eager to give both boys a musical education. On my YouTube channel, I have added the video of her Bach two-part inventions that she recorded when Megan was pregnant with her first baby, and then the Schumann Scenes from a Childhood that she recorded for his early listening. To this day, Cass can tell the difference between Bach and Mozart from his early education of listening to Ruth's Bach preludes. She loved to snuggle and to explore art from the perspective of a toddler. She also attended the weddings of Oya and Dasha during her time with us. We loved Ruth very much, but by the summer of 2024, it was becoming clear that we were no longer able to provide the type of care that she needed in our home. After consulting with Ruth, she thought that an assisted living home in California, a place with lots of sunlight and close to several class students and friends, would work. She now resides at the Forum and adjusted remarkably well for her age. Randy goes out to visit each month to stay a couple days, and we call her weekly via a screen in her room. Ruth is loved and adored by so many. Her example and legacy as a teacher and as a performer pushes us all to work harder and to love music with more passion. Her life story and ability to rise above so many difficult circumstances encourages all when going through difficult times. Ruth will always be a part of our family. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you today. It's been a joy to be with you.